I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm so grateful to have everybody gathered here today. So grateful to have Uncle, who's come a great way to be here with us this evening. We have Daniel Pinchbeck, who's also come a great way. He lives in New York. And that is a great long way to come because this is a very special gathering of people. We have Alex Lightman, who flew from California to be here with us. And a lot of you have come actually a great distance, including Vera Scroggins, who drove all the way from Pennsylvania to be here. And what we're here to talk about this evening is how we can melt the ice in our hearts. We live in a very, very difficult time in the history of man. And I think that we have been living in our heads so much that we forgot about our hearts. And with the ice caps melting, with climate change, with all that's going on, with this great crack in our social structure, we really need to get back in touch with ourselves, our hearts. And that's really what this evening's about. And I'm just really grateful to have an amazing group of people that have gathered here. I'm hoping that we can take something away with us this evening where it's something that will always be with us. We can always carry with us this beautiful, wonderful feeling of being connected to our hearts. And so I wanted to start off with an invocation by Uncle. And he's going to come and give us an invocation. And then we'll have some speakers talk afterwards.
I wanted to do a small ceremony, and I asked permission if I could create smoke, but I can't, unfortunately. Because when you ask my grandmother of what you and we need to do when we get together, she says the most important thing is to create smoke. Because when you create smoke, what it means to us is that it will lift away from us all the ills we carry. And I have so many ills I wanted to get rid of. So I wanted to create smoke. And you're lucky that you live in New York. You have no ills. But us Eskimos, we have many ills. So I wanted to remove those ills. But I won't be able to do it.
Why not?
Because of we cannot create smoke in here. So, yeah. So, instead, what I wanted to do is say a little prayer. If it is okay with you. Is it okay if I say a little prayer? You know what? You know about prayer, right? It's talking to the Great One. So I wanted to do that. The old people, my name is Anganga, by the way. Anganga. It means the man who looks like his uncle. And I do look like my uncle, my father's second oldest brother. His name is Koyagi. But he was named after his uncle, whose name is Anganga. And he was named after Koyagi, who was named after Anganga. So I'm very old. When we became aware of it first time was 1700, the beginning of the 1700. For you, I may not look so old. But for me, thank goodness for L'Oreal. Because of L'Oreal, the makeup, I don't look so old. So later on we can talk about what kind of cream I use. So, but that's how old I am. And I'm from Greenland, the northeast of here. The old people back home, they have a tendency to talk to the great one. And when they do, they say that you and I, we can ask for anything from him. So tonight I wanted to ask him that somehow within us we can connect with our hearts, not the mind. Because my grandmother says that the greatest obstacle in your life is your mind. And I don't want to have that obstacle tonight. I want to connect with your heart. As Varushka says, the old people up north, they say, only by melting the ice in the heart of man, man will have a chance to change and begin using his knowledge wisely. And we have come to the point of the humankind on earth where we need to change. And as you are well aware in New York, or maybe you're not, about climate change. Have you heard about it in New York? So it's too late to stop the melting of the big ice. There's nothing you can do. Nothing. It's too late. The only hope we have left is you. And you. And you. That's the only hope we have. The hope does not lie in Albany, at your parliament. It does not lie at United Nations down here. It lies in you. You are the only hope for mankind. I know it's a big responsibility. That's why I want to say a prayer. It's a prayer. My father loved it, so me too, I love it. It says that asking the Great One to remove the difficulties from within me. And should I succeed to remove the difficulties I carry, and I carry many, then I would become aware of myself in my own beauty. And when I become aware of myself within my own beauty, then I can one more time realize that I'm here to serve. Not you, but him. That's the prayer. And I would like to do it with my instrument. Oh! My grandmother, she would say, when you get together in a circle, ask people to close their eyes to this world and open within. With the eyes you and I we have, she says, are blind. But when you open within, you can feel everything. So close your eyes to this world and open within so you can feel yourself. And this is the way I do the prayer. Oh! Oh! Oh!
빙목 지중의 주님
I am so happy that Lord asked me to come here. I'm so privileged. The only thing she didn't tell me that New York is very hot. It's way too hot. I don't know how you can live here. I hope that it will snow tomorrow.
Don't you dare say
You agree with that? Yeah, me, I want it to snow tomorrow. Then I can feel comfortable. Anyway, I'm from Greenland, and this is the point of entry on Earth for climate change. This is where everything began. I don't know if you knew that. In 1963, in the month of January, 2 young men went to my family land, my sacred land, where you hunt for caribou and muskox. They went hunting, and I don't know if you knew that, but Greenland is held by big ice, and that big ice has many, many fingers. It's very big. The ice itself, the big ice, if you put it to the Quebec border, it will go down to Belize. And it has 4 time zones in it. That's how big the big ice is. The Greenland itself, if you put it on the Quebec border, It will go down to South America. So that's how big it is. And the big ice there is held down by fingers of the big ice. One of the fingers in West Greenland is my land. My grandmother grew up there. She was born in 1893. So that's a long time ago she was born. There, those two young men went hunting, and that finger has a wall like this. In 1960, when I went to visit the first time, it was 1.5 kilometers tall. That's 1 mile. That's the thickness of the ice on that wall. Just like all the Navy people, they do offering to the Great One. Because they are the custodians, like you are the custodians, the caretakers of the environment. You knew that, right? Please say yes. Yes. Yes, that you are the custodians, you caretakers of Mother Earth. And they are in Greenland as well. So they do this and touch the big ice in prayer to the Great One. And they do the offerings of medicine of the earth. And the young man who did touching the last one, he looked up in 1963 in the month of January and noticed that water was coming out of the big ice, somewhere way up there. Since then, we have learned it's probably about 800 meters that water was coming from. So when they went home, they told the elders, stuff going on up in big ice. The water was coming out. And the elders, they said, how can it be? Because in 3 months, it's been more than minus 35 Celsius at that place. At minus 35, how many Fahrenheit? Okay, how many Fahrenheit? Very low. You from Europe? You lost it. Oh, huh? Yeah. Okay. So minus 35 Celsius. Scientifically, in the science, everything should be frozen, but it was not. But the elders did not believe those two young men. They thought that they'd been drinking beer at the American Air Base. And they probably did. Then, in the month of March, 1963, elders themselves, they went hunting. Exactly the same place where many people go hunting in West Greenland, which happened to be my family land. And there, every hunter do their offering to the Great One, and they touch the big ice. And this time, elders themselves looked up to see. At minus 35 at least, for 5 months, the water was not coming out. It was still running. That was the beginning, what you and I in New York City understand to be the modern day climate change. That was 1963. 15 years later, I went here in the United Nations to tell them about that the big ice is melting. That was 1978 in the month of August. After my talk, I got a standing ovation. So I wore business suits, just like you. Business suits, and I had a little briefcase, brown one. It was empty, but who cares? Yeah, it looked very good. So And I got standing ovation 10, 15 minutes long. The Eskimos have a problem, big problem. They have something called ego. In New York, you don't have the problem, but in Greenland, we have that big problem, ego. My ego was so big. But I was deemed to be a well-spoken young Eskimo when I gave a speech about melting of the big ice. I'm a runner for the elders. I run for them. They tell me what to tell the world, and I go to the world. That has taken me to 66 countries so far. I only go somewhere when I'm invited. But so far, thousands of cities in 66 countries I have been to tell them about something called climate change. Now, that big ice, from being more than 5 kilometers on the average, which is more than 3 miles thickness on the average, in 1963, it's down to 2 kilometers. That means 3 kilometers of ice has melted. It's now in the ocean. Now, of course, as you know, when cold water is cold, it's compacted like that. Does anyone of you know how to make boiled water? Or you just go to the restaurant? When you boil water, it expands. And when it is boiling, it bubbles. That means the water will expand. Right now, it's pretty cold. That's why the Arctic Ocean is all black, like you quote. It's all black. That means it has so much life in it. It has the biggest concentration of plankton on Earth. When you go to the water here, it's dead. You can see it's dead. It has no texture to it. It has no smell to it, except bad. But that means the water is dead. The Arctic is living. But very cold. The moon is starting to warm up. You know what will happen? The water will expand. For every Celsius, it will expand more than 2 meters. I am a very tall Eskimo, as you can see, but even bigger than me. That's 1 Celsius. 2 Celsius, that's more than 4.5 meters. I hope and I pray that you move away from my life. It's never a place to be. Is it really true that those things will happen? Of course it is true. Of course it is true. When the water is warmer, it will expand. We warmed the world in 1963. I spoke personally at the United Nations in 1978. Nobody listened. No one. I traveled 66 countries and talked about it. Now people are willing to listen. I just came from Seattle a few days ago. We were talking about Sailor's Sea. We begin to realize that Seattle will be on the water. Everyone knows about it, but nobody seems to do anything about it. Did you know that we have 15,000, more than 15,000 organizations in the United States of America for environment?
more than 15,000 organizations about the environment. And not one of us are working together. Not one of us. Not some other of us. Why can we not recognize each other? Why can't we not accept each other and work together? In the beginning of the 1900s, my grandmother as a little girl climbed a big mountain. And I was raised with her for 12 years in a tiny village of 3 houses and about 20 people. We listened to her story saying, I was standing on the top of the world, and when I looked at you, you did not feel good. I said, well, she knew that things were not right. She didn't feel good. She says, you did not feel good. Of course, when I came, and when I grew up and I came to New York City, you guys look pretty normal. Look at you. You look pretty civilized, like everyone else. You know what we have failed to do? Change. We failed. And we call the custodians and caretakers of Mother Earth. Isn't it sad that we have forgotten that ceremony? Every one of us, without exception. Every one of us. There are 15,000 organizations. Not one of them working together. What's the matter with us? Are you not good enough? Are you not good enough? Are you not good enough? What about you? You look pretty good enough for me. But we have lost that ceremony of working together. The circle, which has no beginning, no ending, in which we all belong. This is it. That's the circle. The beauty of the circle is that we cannot see each other's backs. And the strength of the circle is that we can only see each other's beauty. That's the spiritual foundation of the Eskimo belief. The circle, which has no beginning, no ending, in which we all belong. That means in the east, where the sun rises, it's always yellow. So we have yellow people. In the south, where the sun shines highest upon us, she's always white. So we have the white people. In the west, where the sun sets, she's always red. So we have the red people. And at night, in the dark, it's always black. So we have the black people. So every one of us belong here. Everyone. No one is more important than the other. And when we sit in a circle, no one can have a backbite about you from your back. No one can put you down from your back. How can they? All they look at is your beauty. That's all they see. How can anyone ever put you down when all they can see is your beauty? It's a spiritual law unbreakable by man. For we have become bigger than that. The greatest ill of mankind is not tuberculosis, my grandmother said. Nay, the greatest ill of mankind is that we put each other down from your back. Is it true? Yes, it is. We put each other down. I don't know if I told you that I just came out with a little film called Bridge Walkers. I'm a film star. So I'm a film star. And I wanted to describe in that film how you and I, we need to work together. You know that when Christopher Columbus came 500 some years ago, in what today you and I we know as United States of America, you should visit that country. It's an astounding country. Did you know that Spaniards and those who came after him, they killed more than 100 million Native Americans. More than 100 million were killed in the United States of America by the Americans, the original inhabitants like myself. My family was killed, 100 million. In Caribbean, where are you? The young lady from Caribbean, here. More than 15 million were killed in Caribbean. In South America, more than 100 million. In Mexico and down to Panama, we don't know how many Spaniards killed. But in the United States of America, they killed more than 100 million Native people. My family. Isn't it scary? So in that film I described it. I describe it specifically because I cannot live that in that energy anymore. I can't afford it. I'm an old man now. I want to be able to look at your beauty and truly nourish myself through your beauty. And that can only happen when we begin to recognize each other and work together. I don't want to live in the back anymore. I want to cherish the moments we have together. Because when we put our minds together, wonders can happen. But imagine if we put our spirits together, it will change the world. Ta-da! Oh.
Wise words, and also so much history. And he talks about what's happened to create peace around the world. Which brings me to my next speaker, because I think that we have a lot to learn from the past. We have a lot to learn from the people that have been so connected to the earth. We've forgotten how to be connected. We think we're so connected because we're on the internet, we're on our PDAs, we're always, going someplace with some kind of technology. But are we really connected? What are we really connected to? So everything that you said is so poignant and true for this time that we're living in. And so anyway, the next speaker is Daniel Pinchbeck, who wrote a lot about this subject too. And I think that it's really important that we think about what we're headed to. Where are we going? What is the future? A lot of people feel very depressed about the future because of climate change, and there's a lot of reasons to have hope, as you said. I think we can have a lot of hope because we're here together. We can gather together. We have that power. And when people gather together like this, there's nothing more powerful, I think. We can really change things. And we can combine the present, that we're living in now with what has come before us and how people have lived before, connected in the way that they were. So we can take that technology that we have now and really, really expand on that. That's what I think is really exciting about this time that we're living in. Because yes, we're on this precipice. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, really. But we have the power at our hands. What are we going to do with it? So here's Daniel Pinchbeck to talk about how we can move into the future.
Thanks for inviting me. Is the mic good? Does it sound okay? So I'm an author. I wrote a few books. My first book was called Breaking Open the Head, and it was about psychedelic shamanism. And I visited cultures in the Amazon to work with plant medicine called ayahuasca, which I assume most people here know, and Mexico. I visited the Mazatec Indians who have a tradition working with mushrooms. I visited West Africa. I went to visit the Bwiti tribe in Gabon and took iboga in an initiation ceremony there. And that book kind of was described my kind of conversion from kind of secular materialism, scientific skepticism, to accepting kind of the shamanic worldview, realizing that there was these other dimensions of the psyche that shamans and Jungians and you know, kind of mystics talk about all over the world. And so as I finished that book, I became kind of aware that if these cultures, you know, had maintained this connection of this knowledge of this, you know, these other dimensions of being and this sacred plant knowledge and so on, and I found this to be the most important, like, knowledge that I've discovered in my adult life, then I wondered, you know, like, I mean, what else did we have to think about what these cultures said or knew about our time? And I found that in a lot of different, you know, traditional indigenous cultures, there was a sense of, you know, kind of prophetic understanding of this time as a you know, epoch of transformation. Particularly the cultures like the Hopi in Arizona talked about it as the transition from the fourth world to the fifth world, which seemed very close to what the Mayan civilization in the Yucatan talked about as kind of or the Aztecs talked about the age of the fifth sun and the age of the sixth sun. And the classical Maya had developed a whole calendrical system that we just rediscovered in the last, you know, 50 years that had to do with 2012 as the end of a long count. And obviously we passed that threshold. And so I ended up writing a second book that was called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, where I kind of looked at these indigenous knowledge systems and their prophecies and kind of correlated them with Western philosophers, Western thinkers like Heidegger and Nietzsche and Carl Jung and a whole bunch of other people. And I ended up kind of, yeah, like agreeing, you know, with the kind of prophetic knowledge systems, that this was this epochal time of transformation. And I saw that, you know, human consciousness, human civilization is going to have to undergo a profound change. And I didn't really predict I never said that anything in you know, particular, drastic or amazing was going to happen in that year, but that it was like the hinge point of a larger process. And it was actually a very tough year for me. The book came out in 2006, and what I really had seen it as is like an invitation for this awakening that uncles saw. Uncles, yeah, saw it back in, you know, 78 and tried to express. So, you know, people have these awakenings, and you see that this thing is running off the tracks. So I saw that, you know, once again, 2012 seemed to present a big opportunity to the world to kind of awaken. And, you know, some people did awaken for sure. But you know, underlying it, there are these mechanics of this, you know, or this, you know, ecological crisis that's definitely unfolding. And yeah, we can just see that. I guess I was thinking when I was sitting down there that, you know, on some level I'm like a mystic. Like, I really agree with a lot of like Eastern thought, like Vedanta, which is like the metaphysics of Hinduism. And on some level, everything is perfect, right? Like, we're in this situation. It's, you know, if there's one consciousness that's unfolding itself, then this is what's meant to be, and it's amazing and it's miraculous, moment by moment. You know, and if you've had these different experiences of the psyche and these other dimensions, then you'd also have to say that, you know, if there are gods and spirits who are beyond us, like, you know, we could be in a different situation. You know, if they didn't want us to be facing this, you know, they would have turned down the dial, or they would have made, you know, the climate different or whatever. So, you know, everything is on some level must be going perfectly according to the plan, I think. you know, it still seems though that recognizing that part of that plan involves us to kind of rethink what we're doing, you know, on the planet and redirect. And as Rushka was pointing out, you know, really there are, you know, aspects of these indigenous cultures around the world that we do need to reconnect with. I mean, they were, you know, long-term, sustainable, you know, flourished, knew how to shepherd resources and so on. And, you know, we don't know what the next decades are going to bring, but it's likely to be, you know, fairly traumatic, I would think, at this point. You know, and the, you know, whatever is happening, somehow we're not able yet to, you know, take the steering wheel of this civilization and steer it in another direction. You know, these groups can't come together, the governments are obstructed, and somehow, you know, the movement of civil society, of the people that would need to emerge hasn't yet emerged. But it all, you know, it still may unfold, and I'm sure it will in some sense. What I've been doing since the book 2012 came out is a number of things. I started a company and a web magazine and made some films and did a talk show. And most recently, I've launched a new think tank called Center for Planetary Culture. And we just, Yana is my wife, and we're working on it together, and Sarah's also helping us research and put our first kind of projects together. So we just launched the website. It's planetaryculture.com. And the first research paper or effort that we're undertaking, which will probably be ongoing, is really thinking about, you know, how could, you know, what would be a strategic transition plan for human society to kind of deal with, you know, the climate change and the sort of ecological crisis, and move towards a post-carbon civilization, you know, in as quickly, you know, as quick amount of time as possible. Because I recognize that, you know, there are pieces of that puzzle like all over the place, but maybe nobody's really put it together in a way that includes both like what it would require technically in terms of infrastructure, in terms of like industry and transport and food, so on, and what it would mean socially in terms of political economic system, and then also what that would then mean if you understood all the things that would need to happen, what that would mean in terms of consciousness, like how would you communicate or convey that? How would you use media, you know, and social media and whatever tool that we have to kind of, you know, get people on board for a new program. In fact, just today, one of the, since I'm a communicator and a writer and a thinker, like media is like sort of like my medium, I guess. And we had a meeting with friends of ours who have like a successful web magazine. It's very cultural. They've got a beautiful, shiny office, but it's all art. It's all like, you know, television coverage. There's very little about anything that's really happening on the planet. So, you know, for me, it was another like kind of effort that maybe many people here have made in their different fields, where you're just kind of like, well, how can we, you know, open this up so that some of this material about what's happening to the earth can come through into the mainstream. And once again, it was so apparent how extremely difficult it is, and how there's a kind of psychological obstructions, and then our kind of, you know, corporate financial system is an obstruction, because everybody's committed to their little, you know, thing they have to do, or the way that the thing is succeeding for them at this point in time. So we've gotten caught in all these little, you know, kind of artificial realities that, you know, post-industrial capitalism and so on has kind of put us in, but we've lost our ability to sort of understand the whole and to act from a holistic perspective. And, you know, one of my favorite thinkers, both in the film and then also for the think tank, has been Buckminster Fuller, because it seems to me that like he has shown a path where you could, in a way, like reconcile, you know, science, technology, that evolution with, you know, indigenous design, and with a kind of, you know, approach to you know, human existence in the future that melds together, you know, ancient and new knowledge, with the idea that we could ultimately create a kind of civilization designed to uplift everybody and to bring, you know, sustainable life, abundance to everybody on Earth. And I think that will be ultimately where we go. It may be that there's, you know, many disasters along the way. It's quite likely that, as Uncle said, that, you know, most of Manhattan will be underwater, as well as many of the other cities around the world. One idea that interests me is, if we were to conceive of this as maybe like an initiatory process for humanity as a whole, I think that's like a very helpful way to think about it. Every traditional culture around the world would have initiation rites where people would go on vision quests, and now there's more and more of an understanding that those experiences actually had a kind of neurophysiological basis. In that, the most recent structure of the brain is the neocortex, which only developed like in the last 150,000 years. And although the neocortex develops, as the individual grows up, it may be that it doesn't fully develop without a secondary shock that can be culturally induced through some type of rite of passage, using shamanic plants or a walkabout or so on. And what that does is by putting people in a transpersonal, like a visionary state, a transpersonal state of awareness, it lets them get out of their egoic conditioning and then have more of an attunement to the whole, or to be back in their kind of intuitive mind. And somehow modern culture, as we develop technology and science and so on, we lost touch with these kind of initiatory processes. It was, as again, I think you can step back and almost see it as a natural or evolutionary kind of pattern or process that humanity as a whole has gone through. So now our culture, people don't go through that initiation, so they get locked in their little egoic identities. And so it's almost because we lost that in terms of our culture, we've been unconsciously constructing a situation of universal calamity to force a collective awakening and collective initiation. So that's one of my theories about what's happening. Does that make sense? All right, cool. I guess you probably are all you're here at this talk, you're probably all relatively on the same page anyway. But what interesting about that for me is, all these cultures around the world, and, I myself through shamanism and so on, had many experiences that were, as he pointed out, miraculous in terms of like psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena, telepathy, and so on. So what if this initiatory crisis that humanity has kind of self-willed on ourselves is actually like the necessary kind of process through which we are able to access, we're almost forced or compelled to access these latent aspects or capacities of the psyche. So what we end up with as we go through this crisis is kind of a civilization that Jose Arguelles, who was one of the big kind of writers about the Mayan calendar, talked about as a psychotechnical civilization, where we're using our rational technical capacities to actually kind of explore all the different aspects of the psyche and bring the psyche to its full flourishing, to the point where that could even have tremendous physical effects on the earth, in my opinion. I mean, in my book, I talked about like the Hopi Indians in Arizona, and a anthropologist who lived with them for years and was a Cambridge-trained skeptic, but he admitted when he hung out with the Hopi that they would do these rain dances, and often, sometimes these rain dances would have a miraculous success, where the Hopi would gather and rain would start to fall, even though it was a blazing hot sun and a bright blue day. So maybe we're pushing ourselves into this crisis so that at the last minute we're going to access these latent aspects of the psyche and somehow rebalance or create some kind of miraculous next step for humanity. And maybe in that we'll move more into this Buckminster Fuller kind of mode of using technology rationally and efficiently to elevate humanity as a whole, liberating the creative commons and the knowledge commons and so on. So that, I think, is the positive end goal that we could get to, but in the interim, we are going to have to figure out how to do it and how to work together. So my effort at the moment is directed towards planetaryculture.com. I hope you'll check it out and join us, and we'll be running a blog there. And then really what we're really going to do is think about what is the rapid strategic plan to do what we can do, which I think it's true that we're not going to stop the ice from melting, but hopefully we can avoid even now the most destructive possibilities, which are definitely serious and hanging out above us right now. Anyway, not the happiest message, but it was very nice to talk to you, and thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And you mentioned Buckminster Fuller. I'm a huge fan of Buckminster Fuller as well, Bucky. And there's something that he said, which I think is a really important thing to think about, which is, what's a quote of his that I love. You don't change things by fighting the existing reality, but create a new model. So that's what we need to do. We need to create a new model. And the model needs to be based on all these things that we've been talking about. And one of the things that has brought us all together this evening is a movie that I'm making, which is called A Crack in Everything. And I have an amazing, I just feel so blessed to have so many amazing people in the cast and the crew that have sort of come together. But the story is a rather poignant one that really moves me because I didn't know that I was going to make this movie, that I was going to be doing something like this. But 3 years ago, I was asked to help with a project which brought me into Pennsylvania, and it was actually researching for a project that was making ads to counter the ads that the gas industry was basically stuffing down everybody's throats. And so I didn't know anything about fracking. I didn't know what it was. I had no clue. But I'm sort of a research queen, so I just talked to everybody that I could talk to in Pennsylvania, because that was actually the closest that I could get to, because of course it's going on in Texas and all around the world, not just in this country. So the first week, I have to tell you, the first week that I spent in Pennsylvania, I cried nonstop. I couldn't stop crying because I hadn't been to Pennsylvania for a really long time, and I noticed how much the countryside had changed. I mean, there are parts that have turned into toxic wasteland, basically. And I was so horrified by people's stories, and I was like wondering, I don't understand how more people don't know what is going on in Pennsylvania. What's wrong with our media? What's going on? I didn't know anything, nothing. And then when I started talking to people about it, people were like, what are you talking about? Nobody could believe me. And of course, things have changed somewhat over the past 3 years because there have been a few filmmakers. Josh Fox made a really powerful, a couple of very powerful films, Gasland 1 and Gasland 2. I don't know if any of you have seen these two very important documentaries, but they're very powerful. And of course, the gas industry is one of the most powerful industries on the planet, as well as the oil industry. So it is not in their interests to have us know a lot of what's going on the ground. And so I took it upon myself to write a story. I was actually really moved so deeply that a story just came to me. And a lot of it has to do with women's stories. They're amazing, amazing stories. I mean, not just in Pennsylvania, but everywhere. People who are fighting the biggest industry on this planet. They're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their health. They're fighting for their children. And we have to think about that. What is this legacy that we're leaving behind for our children and for our grandchildren and their grandchildren? Are we not just going to sit around and allow this to happen? Allow sacrifice zones? I heard someone talk once about sacrifice zones and how there are very particular areas that some powers that be believe can be sacrificed for the so-called good of others. And I question that. Well, why? Why does anybody have to be sacrificed? I don't understand that. Nobody has to be sacrificed. We have renewables. We have a different way to get our energy. Yes, we're all addicted. We're all addicted to energy. We're addicted to our computers. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to light. We have, we have a way of life that we think we need this energy. So, but we don't need to sacrifice people to get it. We don't need to sacrifice anything. So we need to change our mindset about this. And one of the things that I've been so inspired by are so many people, I mean, but in particular women. And there's a woman who's here tonight with us, Vera Scroggins, who's been such a big inspiration to me. And I am just taken aback by her determination, she's just a fireball. You know, she was actually forbidden by the gas industry. That she has an injunction against her, which she's fighting right now, which she'll talk about in a few minutes. But she's not giving up. And none of us should give up. There's nothing to give up. Why should we give up? I don't know how many people who have children here, but this is for the children, okay? This is for the grandchildren. And Vera is a grandmother. She understands that. But even if we don't have children, we have a responsibility, all of us, we all have a responsibility to live our lives, even if we think that, okay, we're on a precipice and the ice is melting and whatever's happening, we still have a responsibility, each one of us, to do whatever we can to move into a different age, a different era. And anyway, I can't think of a better person to talk about this and just the effect it's had on citizens of Pennsylvania, on the human spirit. So with that, I introduce Vera Scroggins.
This is very painful for me. I have watched the earth being poisoned and penetrated by metal for thousands of feet in our countryside. Since 2008, when I saw the first drill rig, come on a farm, the Teal farm and the Ely farm. We have drilling now since then. When I first saw it, I knew this was the end. We have over 800 holes in our county right now, and we have 40 counties being drilled in our state, besides other states, of course. Nobody warned us. Nobody told us anything until we saw what happened. And now I'm warning the world. I'm showing everybody what's happening. I'm videotaping and photographing and documenting since the beginning. And I give citizen tours to people from all over the world, besides our country, to show them how we are poisoning the water, the precious water, which is the blood of the earth. This is the blood of the mother. And this has been going on for decades, besides this industry. And nobody is screaming about it, which we should be screaming about it and be in the streets. Poisoning the air also. So they make these holes thousands of feet. And metal bars, pipes go into the earth thousands of feet, breaking through the earth under high pressure. And then they have holes within holes. They have casings, which they claim will protect the earth, which it doesn't. And the high pressure goes in with water, millions of gallons of clean, precious water that gets mixed with sand and chemicals and gets put in under these high pressures and pushed right through and breaks open the rocks horizontally inside the earth, thousands of feet below. And they tell us as if nothing is happening from this, as if no repercussions. How can they even imagine that? That when you penetrate the earth, which is the body, it's our body. It's my body, it's your body. You're being penetrated with metal. You're being pushed with all kinds of chemicals and water through you as they release this energy they want, this dark energy that's in the rocks, this energy that is gases, methane and other gases, warming gases, like he says, warming, and they're releasing it into the air, releasing it into the pipes, taking it all over our country. And much of it is going up. They're burning. We have balls of fire throughout our countryside as they burn it before they connect to the pipes. We feel the vibrations. I feel it in my body. I am being penetrated. I am being poisoned. I'm warning the world because this is the end. This is man's last stand. They could have listened to Uncle in 1978 and all the other uncles before him in 1963 and before, but they didn't. Now it's too late, basically. This is being released now by the thousands of holes just in Pennsylvania. And then throughout the United States, hundreds of thousands of holes, releasing the energy, releasing this dark energy, this methane, as they penetrate and split the body of the mother. And who is stopping it? So we are warning everyone, showing them. I bring them to the sites and I show them. Look what they're doing right next to the homes of people within hundreds of feet, let's say 200-300 feet. Look what they're doing on school properties. They're even on the school properties. All the schools are leased in my county. This is Susquehanna County, just below Binghamton, New York. And the farms where your food is coming from, your milk, your meat. They're drilling and releasing this on all the farms. And they want us to be happy about it and be grateful about it and thank them for it. And they think it's a blessing. Well, maybe it is. In some ways, maybe it is. Because like Uncle says, the United States will be covered, will be done. The waters are rising, they're warming, and large parts of the earth will come underwater, including your lovely Manhattan Island. And maybe it needs to be underwater, because everything that we've done to the earth is this country, and we expand and export it to other countries. We pollute, we poison, and we destroy. This is America. Mainly what we export is destruction. Destruction of the earth, destruction of our environment, destruction of us. So this land will be killed, will be covered with water, because we have to end the destruction and the hatred of the mother, and actually maybe the hatred of the feminine. We all have the feminine inside of us, besides the masculine. And there must be some kind of hatred or self-loathing or shame that we must kill ourselves because we haven't been hearing the message for decades. So we are dying. So those who will rise up, like Uncle says, Greenland is rising up. It's moving up out of the water. Some areas are. There the survivors will be, and there will be a new species of human and generation, because this land, which is based on profit, making the most money, absolute greed, insatiable greed. And that's how they've enticed the farmers in my county with the money, the prospect of millions. Even the farmers, their greed arose out of their bodies and took them over so that they desire it with a lust that is beyond description, that they will sacrifice the land, they will sacrifice life, the water, the air, and their own lives and their own children and all future generations they're willing to sacrifice for the filthy lucre. They fell for it, and now they are dying with everyone. And I want to bring my beloved here, Carly, who feels the pain of the mother, the pain of the earth. As we are being sacrificed, we are being penetrated with metal. It is basically a form of rape also, the rape of the earth and the mother, and being penetrated. You know, in India, they killed women, young women recently. I was in such pain when I read it. They penetrated the woman with metal bars in her vagina. Can you imagine something like that? I can't even imagine that any mind could think of such a thing. And they did that. And of course, the woman didn't die right away. She took a little bit of time, maybe a few days, a week, destroyed her. To me, that was the same like the earth. Destroy the earth with the metal and kill the mother. And so the race of humans want to die. They want to die and be destroyed. So we feel it when we see all this drilling. We smell it. We hear it. We feel it in our countryside. This is what I have to see and drive by every single day. And this is what I show the world. And what will end up will end up. What will be will be. And who will survive will survive. And we shall see what will be next. What generation will be next. What human species will be next. Because this species really has to go. The profit-making, money-making, desire and lust for money and power over the bodies of all the people that they just walk right over and destroy.
Hi. I just want to say that I'm really, really honored to be standing next to this woman because thank you for fighting for all of us. So many generations of children, thank you. But I scare people, and I really hope I don't scare you tonight because I talk about rape. I talk about rape a lot because I think that not a lot of people are looking. And this fracking to me is a direct mirror of the rape that's happening to the women on the planet. So this has been my voice and my way of healing from my own rapes. And I'm a woman who grew up in crisis centers and heard so many women's stories, and I know the men are being raped too, but I'm telling you it's because your mamas have been so raped that they forgot how to protect you. And I'm saying that this is an issue. So we can talk about ecological devastation, but what about the devastation of the women who are giving birth to you, the women who are standing before you? We don't deserve this. Our earth doesn't deserve this, and we need to heal this somehow. And we need to get real strong here and real brave and have the courage to have these conversations because this is where we need to go right now. This is where we need to pray. This is where we need to be. And thank you for listening, but that's all I really have to say. Thank you. Oh, I love that. Oh. The source of our life is in the woman. You know, the womb is holding the waters of creation, and the waters that we see being poisoned on the earth is the damage and the poison holding inside of the women right now. So when we heal our women from this rape and this devastation, we can heal our world, we can heal our earth, and we can heal our waters. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I have many friends that have lost their water, and I've gone to their homes. We have private wells. And when you look inside the private well, it's such a shock when you look in there and you see boiling water. It looks like you're cooking pasta. It's boiling water. This is the gases, the warm, hot gases coming into the water, and there's all these bubbles. And when you see that, it's the most horrifying sight. And then you have to bathe with it. You have to try and drink it, and you find at some point you cannot, because it brings up also heavy metals, radioactivity, other pollutants and chemicals, and you cannot use it. Then you have to have replacement water. And this is the most worst thing to experience when you cannot trust your water any longer. And it's become poison. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing about the feminine, and that this is such an important thing, actually. And I know that it's heavy, you know, it's very heavy, that what we're talking about here, but it's really important. It's really important for us to face this and to face the feminine. We've been hiding from it, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this project, because I feel that women's stories, look at Hollywood. How many women directors are there that are even acknowledged? How many women's stories are acknowledged? Not so many. And so I think it's really important that the whole storytelling sort of theme that we're talking about here tonight be included in the bigger picture. We have some very important stories to tell. So, and I would suggest that everybody really looks into their own heart. Try to balance the feminine within themselves, whether you're a man or a woman. It's not about, you know, women bashing men. Okay, we're not, you know, it's not about that. We're all responsible because we all have feminine and negative, I mean, feminine and masculine. That was not feminine and masculine. Boy, that was a Freudian slip. Listen, I love men. I do. I love men. I love women. I mean, I just think that we really need to begin to balance within ourselves and just begin to tell. Let's allow women to tell their stories. What's wrong with emotion? What is wrong with it? You know, in the workplace, it's a bad thing to be emotional, isn't it? Women understand what I'm talking about. Like, okay, you're not going to get very far if you're an emotional female. And I think that men need to understand that they need to feel their own emotions more and get more in touch with it. And so, because maybe we're balanced, we have one balance, you know, completely off balance. I can't even talk, but it's really gotten too far. And yeah, it's hard for me not to get emotional too. And I can totally understand when you're talking about something this important that it's hard not to get emotional. And I think we need to get in touch with that collectively. So it's a collective sort of heart that we need to melt. The ice that Uncle talks about, okay, he's talking about it in a way symbolically. It's collective. We all are in this together. So anyway, so my feeling is that we can feel these emotions, but then we also need to think about how we can pass that and think about the light. What's the light? What's the light at the end of the tunnel? The movie that I'm making is called A Crack in Everything, and it's inspired by Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. So there's a crack in everything, but that's how the light gets in. That is how the light gets in. How else is it going to get in? So we're cracked. Each one of us, we're severely cracked. And we have an opportunity to really move past that and get to something else that's much bigger than ourselves. So on a slightly different level, like on the level of the physical, if we want to talk about the level of the physical of where we get our energy, we have renewables. We have the sun. We don't have to pay to get the sun, right? The sun shines every day, hopefully, somewhere in the world. But, you know, we have renewables. We don't need to get the energy in the way that is destroying people's lives. So that's really the light at the end of the tunnel for me in this conversation. And but what that requires is that each one of us like makes a change, like practically. And so how can we do that? Well, we have another speaker. His name is Alex Lightman. He's flown all the way from California to be here this evening. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty long distance. I mean, Uncle flew a long distance too, but yeah, that's a little. I mean, I'm blown away. I'm blown away that he came this long distance to be with us tonight, and I think he has some important things to say, to maybe uplift our spirits a little bit. Because no, it's good. It's good. It's all good because we need to experience that too. It's a cathartic thing. You know, we need to get it out. That's part of, you know, why we're all here together. But so my friend Alex Lightman, who's a great inspiration and has actually helped me greatly in so many ways to understand social media. Social media, I didn't understand how to use social media before I met him. And he's one of those 5,000 friend people that everyone keeps trying to make friends with him on Facebook, you know, and he just keeps having to, I don't know why Facebook has this 5,000 friend limit. I think it's so silly. But anyway, he's going to talk to us about what is the reality of, like the physical, like reality of what we can move into with energy. Like why do we have to be addicted to fossil fuels? We don't. And he can explain to us how we can get off fossil fuels in a very short amount of time. So anyway, welcome to Alex Lightman, my dear friend.
Daniel Pinchbeck, don't you dare leave. So I want to show you two different worlds. And part of the reason I wanted to come is to see you, Uncle. I think of the shaman as the walkers between worlds and people who make a profession of being able to live in this world and also go into other worlds. And there isn't just one world that we're all living in. There's actually a different world that people who believe in oil have. And I want to share with you something that's in every airport right now. It's the magazine of the Council on Foreign Relations. Who here has heard of the Council on Foreign Relations? These are very powerful people, senators, congressmen, who set up by the Rockefeller family a long time ago. So this is foreign affairs, big cracking deal, shale and the future of energy. And it's almost impossible to read it if you're in the consciousness that most people have in this room without laughing and crying at the same time, because it's so oddly, weirdly cherry-picked to just pick out that tiny fraction of things that sound kind of good in a general way, but there's nothing in here about pollution. And so I just want to tell you where these people are coming from. This is from the article Powering the Pentagon, Creating a Lean, Clean Fighting Machine. And it's by Sharon Burke, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Operational Energy Plans and Programs. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, the U.S. naval aviator Thomas Moorer questioned Takeo Kurita, a former vice admiral of the Imperial Japanese Navy, as part of the U.S. military's post-war interrogation of Japanese commanders. Kurita told Moorer that one of the most significant reversals of fortune Japan had suffered during war was the loss of fuel supplies. Quote, "We ran out of fuel," Kurita said, and by the end of the war, the Japanese military had grown so desperate it was operating its equipment on fuel distilled from old tires, rice, and even pine needles. I actually heard that it took 10,000 roots of trees to make 1 gallon of fuel. What I learned then, Moore would note years later, was never lose a war, and the way to lose a war is to run out of oil. So this is how all of the death, all of the sickness, all of the female breast cancer, all of this can be justified. Well, yeah, but we'd be taken over by the communists, the fascists, or whatever if we ran out of oil. Therefore, we must drill to have our own oil. So there is nothing that can't be justified. And to make the point, she says also, never break the chain. Since the birth of the petrochemical industry in the mid-19th century, fuel has fed victory and defeat in war. Quote, at the present time, my chief difficulty is not the Germans, but gasoline, General George Patton wrote in August 1944, as fuel shortages at the front limited the U.S. Third Army's advance into Germany. Quote, if I could only steal some gas, I could win this war. So everything can be justified, and there's nothing that we can say that can make a difference. And one of those things includes the fact that 2 EPA scientists wrote an article, and you can find it by just typing in a number, and the number is 886.5 billion. Does anyone know what that number is? That's what we spend on health care to deal with the effects of oil, natural gas, and coal. 886 billion. It's bigger than the Department of Defense's entire budget. I've never understood something. There are so many female cancer charities, breast cancer, pink ribbons. It doesn't make sense to me to try to find a cure for breast cancer when carcinogens are going into your air, your water, your food, your soil. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter if you find a cure for breast cancer if you're going to continue to take in poisons. So I worked my way through MIT as a roughneck in the oil fields of Texas. I actually was a drilling engineer. I worked on those platforms. I would go into Texas and see a forested area. We would lease the land from somebody. We would knock down all the trees, and the first thing we would do is build this giant pit, the same word that's used to like the pit of hell, and that would be where we'd put all our tailings. That would be where we'd put all the liquid that came up from all the fracking mud. So in America, there's this weird idea that fracking is something new, that the pollution is something new. Before fracking, we drilled 6 million wells, and every one of them left behind a football field size chunk of the earth where you can never grow anything again. And while people talk about the fracking thing, it's so safe, I assure you that the worst thing that anyone could do if you were in a fight was to threaten to throw you in the pit, because we knew it was a pit filled with poison. We knew that we would become sick and possibly die if we were actually in that pit. And I got into many fist fights in Texas, but nobody ever threw me in because we knew, even among a bunch of people, that that was like killing somebody. So the idea that the oil company and the drillers don't know that this is poison is silly. But we also put up with some ridiculousness. One of them is that there are over 500 chemicals that go into fracking mud, fracking fluid. Do you know how many the EPA keeps track of, sporadically? But I mean the total number of chemicals. Anyone else have a guess? Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's actually 12. So when they say that it's safe, here's what you can say. There are 500 chemicals. They only track 12, and they only track them sporadically. And the U.S. Geological Survey even criticized the EPA. This is the same organization that says that fossil fuels cost 1/3 of all healthcare costs, $886 billion. So how can it be, oh, by the way, there's a chunk this long in the article that says, we're not counting this, 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 and this. There's at least a dozen things they're not counting to come up with that. So how can it be that we have such a mismatch between a Department of Defense that is supposed to take care of us and millions of people being killed by fossil fuels? It's because people don't know that there are alternatives, which brings me to the other world. And this is the world of Tony Seba. Tony Seba is the lecturer on 2 things at Stanford University. He's a serious guy. One, he's the lecturer on clean tech at Stanford. The other, he's the lecturer on disruptive technology. And basically, he's not in love with incumbents. He's not in love with companies that are, just because they're big, somehow they have the ability, they're too big to fail, which now has become too big to jail. And Tony Seba writes about the fact that solar, we're using right now 1 terawatt a year of electricity in America. 1 terawatt in Europe, and 1 terawatt for the rest of the world. So the world uses about 3 terawatts of electricity a year. Total consumption of energy is about 14 terawatts a year. He says that it's absolutely impossible to meet the needs by 2050 of 30 terawatts without having the majority of that come from solar. So the sooner we basically get to solar, the better. Now, this quarter, right now, is a real milestone. 1% of the energy in the United States will come from solar. That's pretty interesting. It may sound like it's not very much, right? Well, here's what's fun. Let's do a little bit of math. And maybe math is male, but you'll like this math. So bear with me for just a moment. If you want to see how long it takes for something to double, you just take 72 and you divide it by that number. So something that grows 36% a year doubles every 2 years. With me? Solar is growing 35% a year. So and there's some rounding error. So basically it's doubling every 2 years. It's 1% in 2014. In 2016, it'll be 2% of all of our energy. In 2018, it'll be 4%. In 2020, it'll be what? Where am I at? Help me out here. Okay, so 2016 was 4%? Oh, no, 2018 was 4%. So 2020 is 8%. 2022 is 16%. 2024 is 34%. I'm sorry, 32%. Here's where it gets interesting. In 2026, it's 64%. And in 2028, it's more than 100%. So there is no need to actually keep building coal-fired power plants, which have to be amortized over 20, 30, 40 years. There's no need to ever build another gas-fired plant. There's definitely no need for oil plants. I have actually several slides. I could show them to you. I have them with me. But Varushka didn't want us to use slides for this. But here's what's amazing. Last year, the number one source of new electrical generating capacity was natural gas, but then it was solar. This year, there have been no new nuclear plants. There are no new coal plants. There's no new oil plants. There's no new gas plants. It's all solar and wind. And in Europe, they're actually shutting down coal plants, gas plants, and oil plants, so there's less this year than last year. They're ahead of us. So just to an extent that would shock most people who look at it, the war is already over. It's just in America that we're pretending that there's an innovation called fracking. Now, I actually got hired by the White House to write a national innovation plan for the U.S. And amazingly, this is after I sent them my book about why we should end the U.S. embargo of Cuba, which of course isn't U.S. policy. But I wrote this and I said, okay, if you're going to have innovation, how do you define innovation at the national level in America? What's the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy definition of innovation? They don't have one, but they said call the Department of Defense. So I did. They don't have one. They said call DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They didn't have one. So I had to make up my own. And here's my definition of innovation. Doing more with less, measurably. Now, does fracking do more with less? You pointed out it uses a lot of water. Well, when I was drilling wells back in 82, 83, it was about $1 million a well, and we wasted a lot of water. What fracking is just simply taking water that's free, that doesn't cost the companies anything, and using more of it, and using more of these chemicals, and using land that's free. Let's talk about that for just a second. There's a big battle going on right now in Nevada about federal lands. The federal government has leased 144 million acres of land to oil and gas companies. The total amount of money that they get is $6 billion. The total amount of money for the energy sector is $8 trillion. So in other words, they're giving basically nothing for this land. Now, that 144 million acres came in 28,000 individual deals. A deal comes in and says, can we have this land? They go, sure. Here you go. It's free. It's free. It's free. 120 requests to use land for solar came in, and the Bureau of Land Management said, oh my God, it's too many. We have to put a moratorium on it for 18 months. Does that make sense to anybody here? People made an outcry and they went, okay, I guess we'll try and do it. And they do, maybe 1 or 2 solar things a month, and they do 1,000 oil things a week. But why is that amount of land significant? Because with 8% of that land that's already being used and abused by the oil companies, the United States could generate over 100% of all its electrical power. So in a space 108 miles by 108 miles, which is a tiny fraction of that, we could produce over a terawatt of power a year. And if you made that about 30% bigger, you would have enough to make ammonia through solid-state ammonia synthesis, which makes ammonia from air, water, and electricity. Ammonia is NH3. It's 82% nitrogen, 18% hydrogen. Air is 78% nitrogen. So basically what you're doing is you're taking the hydrogen out of the water and you're taking oxygen out of the air. The byproduct of this is O2. It's pure oxygen. So it starts with air and water, and when you combust it, it produces air and water with no carbon byproducts at all. Now, why is this important? Why do you care? Well, I think it's terrible. Drilling is terrible, but there's something I think that's even worse. And it's a dirty little secret that every little government knows, but I'm willing to bet that almost nobody in this room, perhaps Uncle, knows this, but that fertilizer, feed the green revolution. You know, we have told how the green revolution is so great, and also we need oil for agriculture. It's actually not true. We don't need oil for agriculture. But what people are talking about is they're conflating oil and natural gas. So natural gas, methane, goes as a feedstock to 750 plants that are Haber-Bosch plants. The process that was used to make fertilizer was invented by the father of chemical warfare, Fritz Haber, who is the actual guy who turned the valves to turn on mustard gas and chlorine gas and to cause people in World War I trenches to die horribly. He actually insisted on being the one to kill them. So he developed this process by which you put natural gas in and you take the C's, you know, like methane is CH4, takes clips off the carbon. Now, if you're taking the carbon out and you're taking the oxygen out, do you know what carbon and oxygen make? Carbon monoxide, CO. So each of these plants produces 15 tons an hour of carbon monoxide. Just the ones in China alone kill 2 million people. So Auschwitz, we talk about this as if it's sometime in the past and we have Holocaust deniers. What's amazing is we don't even have Holocaust questioners in the present day in 2014 saying, wait a minute, how many people, you have to ask, multiply 15 tons an hour of carbon monoxide times 750 plants. How many people does that kill? It's definitely more than 2 million people. So if you go to governments and say, well, why? You can't stop it. They'll go, well, do you want to be responsible? Do you want to be responsible for killing half the people in the world and having the other half fighting with each other because they all starve? So part of the reason we're stuck with oil and gas and coal is because we're always faced with false choices. So choice. Do you want your son to be killed or your daughter to be killed? That's the choice that we're given all the time. And we're not allowed to ask, well, can't you make fertilizer without coal, oil, or natural gas? Can't you make energy without water? Can you do this? And the answer to these questions, if we ask them, is, well, yeah, we can. So I want to play a different game than the game we're playing in America. So I went 2 weeks ago to Mexico, to a university that has 165,000 students and 15,000 faculty. And I talked to the head of the university and all the top professors, and I said, do you know that in Mexico, if you took an area that's 170 kilometers by 170 kilometers in a state bordering the United States, that you could make enough electricity to power all of Mexico and all of the United States, to ship the electricity across the border, and you could make all the ammonia, and you don't need Pemex anymore. You don't need the Petróleos Mexicanos, the company. And what's interesting is that the president of Mexico is passing legislation so that in June, for the first time, there'll be a deregulated market. Pemex will not have a monopoly. So here's my whole thing. I don't expect that a Congress or a Senate that is bought and paid for and owned and is puppeteered by oil and gas and coal companies, where Mitt Romney can actually stand up in front of Americans and say, I love coal, which is just like saying, I love to maximize the sickness and death and cancer and tumors of America. It's the same thing. So I don't care if America does this. If America doesn't, then Mexico will do it. and America will just lose all of those jobs. So America can either go solar fast, or Mexico will go solar for America. So thank you.
So what I thought we would do now is actually maybe open up the conversation to you guys, and if you have any questions for Uncle, for Alex, or for anybody that's spoken this evening, or anybody else, maybe this is the time to do that. So would you like to ask a question to someone? Yes? You? Here. You just give it.
Good evening, and I'm really sorry about my accent. But I have a question for Alex. I have a lot of friends. I have been amazed by how many people really say I don't believe in climate change. Because I have researched a lot about it through writing a newspaper for my university. I have found a lot of information about fracking and fossil fuel, and I do believe in it. It's kind of obvious. It's not long ago. But then a lot of people say, well, it will be too expensive. Like, it's not possible. What they say about, yes, it is possible and it's cheaper, is not true. And I want to know, is it possible? Thank you.
Thanks for that question.
Are you from Brazil? Oh, Dominican Republic. Okay, yes, it's a good question, and I can answer it. I'll first of all say that climate change is real. Global warming is real. I mean, we have the evidence of Greenland. Is the ice increasing or decreasing? It's decreasing. So it's warming. I mean, it's warming where there's ice. And let me just ask one quick question. This is what I would do. Because people are always put into these false choices of yes or no. But I think that we need to change the dialogue about water. The more that you talk about water, the better. What percentage of the earth, this world, is water? Who can tell me? 95, 70, anyone else? Do you know what? 80? No. Because just like with Uncle speaking, he's talking about a different consciousness. And sometimes sometimes ayahuasca, sometimes ibogaine, all these things can help us change consciousness. But mathematics is the best drug of all because it's instant and cheap. I am going to give you a trip, a head rush right now. That's just as good as anything you would get from Adderall or LSD. Okay, you ready? Everybody that you ask that question who has an answer will typically say 70 to 71%. That's flat earth consciousness. This isn't a flat two-dimensional world. It's a three-dimensional world. And the percentage of water is 0.06%. And of that, 97% will kill you if you drink it because it's salt water. And another 2% is frozen in the 3 poles. And there are 3 poles. There's the North Pole, the South Pole, and the Himalayas. And so you have 1%. And that includes surface water and underground, basically aquifers. And that's what we're using for fracking, which is insane. So we're using 1%, of the 1% of the 0.06% is what we're using. So for me, part of the thing with environmentalists is that we're caught up in this, is there climate change thing? No, what we have to say is, do you like water? See how long you can go without water. Now, I had a bet to lose 20 pounds last month. And in the last 2 days, I went without water. I went for a bike ride in a sweatsuit, and I lost 10 pounds in one morning. But I saw spots in front of my eyes, and I felt like I was going to die. And out of a 37-mile bike ride, I made it to 32 miles. And then I called a friend and said, come get me, because I can't pedal 1 foot farther. And if you've ever tried to fast, who's tried to fast? It's painful, right? So try going the same amount of time without water, and then it puts the fasting in perspective. So that's one thing. But as far as the economics of it, this is what's so crazy. It's as if you are having, did you ever see the movie Tucker? There's a guy who's on trial for making a new automobile. And they say he never made the automobile. And he's saying to the jury, look, I have them out the window. Just come over here out the window and look. And nobody's allowed to look out the window. They're not allowed to look. So here's what people are not allowed to look at. I will tell you facts that you've never heard before. And you have to question why you've never heard what I'm about to tell you. In electricity, there's three parts. Generation, making the electricity. Transmission, sending it across the power lines to a city. So let's say you make it at a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. And then you ship it over here to Manhattan, okay? And then you have distribution, getting it out to people's homes, apartments, coming to the light switches, and running a meter, okay? The cost for Long Island's electric company to go and ship electricity to do transmission distribution is 7 cents a kilowatt hour, okay? You're with me? And the average cost for electricity in America is 13 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, you're with me? Right now, Austin is getting electricity, generation, transmission, distribution for 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And my projects in Mexico, should they be approved, will deliver it for 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, this is less than the cost of transmission and distribution, and it leaves nothing for generation. And this is the reason that Germany, which has 32 gigawatts of renewable energy, of solar, cost their number one electricity company, E.ON, $2.5 billion of losses. And this is why the second company, the Swedish company Vattenfall, which means waterfall, $2.4 billion. Because when you have solar and you have wind, and it's going in there at the peak times, it's actually cheaper to make than you make everything for less than the cost of transmission distribution. And that's what I mean when I say it's already over. The only reason that these companies are still in business is that you have situations like this. In California, we have this thing called Singularity University. The mayor, Rex Parris of Lancaster, went to this week seminar and heard about exponential technologies, and he came back. And he said, okay, every house that's built in Lancaster must have solar, and a permit will take $60 for if you already have a house, and it will take no more than 15 minutes to get it. Now, because of the Koch brothers in Ohio and something called ALEC, A-L-E-C, in Ohio, it can cost you $150,000 to get a permit and take 9 months. The same permit that takes 15 minutes. So what are they doing? They're just playing with politics to make solar more expensive. Because if you just have people able to put up the solar panels, people go, well, what's the payback? What's the payback? And here's the thing. I'll tell you the payback. The concept of payback is meaningless if a company will go and install it for you for free and then reduce your electrical bill from day one. So let's say that you're paying $500 a month for electricity, and someone says, I'll do it for $400. And I'll always keep it at $400, and I'll never have it go above that. What is the payback? Your payback is instant. And that's the situation with financing. One last thing about solar. 90% of the cost has nothing to do with the solar part. 15% is the soft costs of installation, designing, and planning, and 75% is the cost of finance. Because solar has the best rate of repayment on the planet. People who install solar are high-integrity people. They're not liars. They are the most honest people in the world, and you can measure this statistically. 99.5% repayment rate. Do you think that 99.5% of people who get house mortgages are paying back their mortgages? Do you think 99.5% of people who get credit cards or cars are paying it back? There's a complete different consciousness. But even though they have the highest rate of repayment, they also have the highest interest rates. And that's because this island of Manhattan, is filled with people who are scamming people by charging too much for the money, and they're not using their normal formulas because they're basically stacking the deck. But if they just had one legislative hearing, where just like they look at credit card interest rates, and they looked at what people were charging for solar, the price of solar, which is already dropping 40% every 2 years, would be going down another 50 to 60% because the cost of finance, instead of being 18%, 17%, whatever, would drop down to 2 or 3% because of that repayment rate. So when people tell you that it costs too much, here's the thing. Even if it's too much, in another 2 years, it'll be 40% cheaper. In another 2 years, 4 years, it'll be 50, 60% cheaper. It keeps falling because there's a learning curve. What do you have with fracking? What do you have with nuclear? You have a negative learning curve. It just keeps getting more and more expensive. But the only reason there's profits in the oil industry is free water and free land. And without that, and there's one more thing that can't be missed here. China has one foreign military base. I hear that. I don't know where it is. I think that's just a myth. America has almost 1,000 military bases. If you look at a map of Bahrain, it's almost 1/3 of the country is a U.S. military base. Why do we have a military base in Bahrain? Why do we have a big part of Qatar, of Kuwait with military bases? This is a secret but open subsidy for the oil company security. And if Barack Obama just simply said, from now on, we're going to bill the oil companies for their security. You have to pay for your own security. The oil industry would collapse because they would have no profits. They only have a profits because they're making the military, which means the U.S. taxpayer, pay for their oil tanker security. I hope that answers your question.
I am so glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Would you like to know what the old Eskimo people say? That the country United States will stop existing. You cannot live on it. The time will come that you cannot live in the country of the United States of America. How do they know that? The way you treat the land. Fracking. You're running out of water. Simply running out of water. I've never been to Nevada, unfortunately. That's the only country I haven't been to. And Oregon and Hawaii. Those are the only countries in the United States I haven't been to. But I was just coming from Seattle now and from Florida there today. Don't go to Florida. It's too hot. Too hot. So they're running out of water everywhere. And we use it free of charge. But you and I, we pay for water. In New York City, or maybe 10 years ago, there were more than 10 million leaking faucets. And every drop of a leak from a faucet fills up a bathtub times 10 million. That's how much water in New York City, in Manhattan, we waste every day. Every day. You know how much it costs to fix up that faucet? Less than $5 just to fix it up. It takes about 15 minutes to fix it up so it doesn't drip anymore. Less than $5, 15 minutes, 10 million. We will save a bathtub every day for drinking water. That was 10 years ago. It's probably gone much worse now because New York City is really, infrastructure is falling apart. That more and more faucets are leaking, but nobody really fixes them up. Isn't it amazing what we do with our ability? Just one drop at a time. And with the fracking, have you heard about a country called Alberta in Canada? Beautiful country. More than the size of New York State is in tar sands. And they want to transport it down to Texas. You know how much water they use? Tens of thousands of liters. Tens of thousands of liters water to extract the oil from the sand. We allow it. You and I. We allow it. Why? It's called economy. But whose economy? I'm pretty rich. Oh no. I found a penny today, but I changed pants, so I have no money. But people who develop these things, they make more than I do. They make more than I do.
It's interesting that you talk about a drop of water filling up a bathtub, and we could be saving a bathtub's worth of water. And we recently had about a month's water happen in a day. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that day that it rained all day, it was about a month's worth of water in a day. And there's been like a really erratic weather patterns happening globally. And I was walking down the street in Brooklyn, and I saw all this water just spouting out of a PVC pipe. So much water. And I walked a little bit further, and there was some more water spouting out, and I'm thinking, wow, there's people on this planet that don't even have fresh water, and here this water is going into the concrete, can't even be absorbed into the ground. It's complete lost yield. And we could be catching this water, and then we could be shipping it to the other parts of the world, and giving it to people that are dehydrated and starving. And the fact that we have intelligence and consciousness to make the changes necessary to reshape our behavior towards the planet, and we're not utilizing that intelligence. Like, for instance, we can be taking methane from cows, and we can be taking energy from landfills, and we can be using that to generate energy for our society. And there's places in the world that have done that before. So our intelligence is there. We have the ideas that are necessary, all the renewable energy, all of the new ideas, the consciousness memes that need to be put into place for us to get on a different trajectory. But there are these huge oppressive forces that are keeping people down in the form of the economic infrastructure and in the form of the powers that be that are oppressing all of this innate primitive wisdom that we have, that we need to regenerate the earth. We need to feed back into the sacred mother. We need to we need to be as intelligent as possible right now, more than ever before. But yet we're not doing it. And so I'm wondering, I'm asking you and whoever else wants to comment on this, if you believe that it is possible to have a catalyst of some sort. I mean, everybody's talking about climate change now, but a lot of people are talking about it in a very disempowering sort of way. Like, what can I do? Well, we have a lot of ideas that are floating around. Is it possible to start to implement our wisdom as a species and get us on a different trajectory? Is it possible to implement permaculture and regenerative design and start using our greater intelligence to feed back into the planetary well-being?
Of getting to the moment of action, like just not just the idea we have wisdom, we have the Holy Spirit, we have the knowledge, that is right, is whatever you want. That it takes courage, like this champion, to go out there and say, I am doing it, I believe in it, and to do it. And you will have people coming on. Simply, even the government cultivates a tremendous amount of fear when you say, well, I don't want to be exposed, I'm going to arrest you, or young parent documented. Who cares, you love the Mother Earth, you love the Mother Earth to your last breath.
We're going to be discussing things over and over and over. I was part of the United Nations in the East for many, many years. In 1978, I was in the United Nations. And I left to go to Israel. I got very good paid. $500 a day, first class tickets, 5-star hotels, where you can eat like that. And, it was so fascinating to travel the world, paid by the United Nations. What did you do? You paid me a lot of money every day, and I travel all over the world.
I left it because nobody changed. Nobody. I said, I cannot do that anymore. I am simply too old to carry on the way things are doing. I left it. So in the old Eskimo tradition, 300 years ago, Christianity was introduced to us. And an old man asked, why did you teach me about God? And the missionary said, because God is good. But then he says, well, you teach me that if I have sinned, then I will go to hell. But if I did not know that there was a God, would I have gone to hell? So that's how we are. Many years ago, I gave a lecture to professors at Cornell University, this little city up north here. Small university compared to where you were. 1,500 professors. And I was so happy that I said, I'm so happy that you're here, that you're teaching your students to use their knowledge wisely. That's what I said. I'm on a podium. And the silence fell upon. Nobody said anything for the longest time. Then one man stood up and said, Uncle, we cannot do that. Our responsibility as professors at Cornell University is to make sure that the students pass the test, not to use their knowledge wisely. That's how we are in North America. We're not teaching our students to use our knowledge wisely. The old Eskimos say that only by melting the ice in the heart of man, man will have a chance to change and begin using his knowledge wisely. That Eskimos, we're very old, much older than most people. The first archaeological found of spiritual significance is about 30,000 years old. A hunting tool. 30,000. That means I'm pretty old. And that's their philosophy, is to learn to use your knowledge wisely. And we haven't succeeded in the Western world. How sad it is. And it is true what the old Eskimos say, that the beautiful, we call it Turtle Island, North America. The center of Turtle Island will no longer be able to be populated and nothing will grow. And people there will die. When you drop a rock onto the shell of the turtle, it will crack. Guess what? We make cracking. We make fracking. Oklahoma, I don't know if you've been there. Beautiful, beautiful country. You should go there one day. They have more earthquakes now than ever before because of fracking. Because when you drill into it and you put high pressure water into it with chemicals and explode it, the earth shifts. I don't know if you knew that, but the Mother Earth is a living thing. She shifts, and an earthquake happens. Imagine, just for the heck of it, the Yellowstone National Park is not very far from Oklahoma. And the crust of earth is very thin in Yellowstone National Park. Fracking causing earthquakes. Can you imagine that somewhere along the line, that earth around National Park cracks? You know what will come out? The molten ones. In Eskimo we call it the mountains will speak. It's It's a volcanic eruption. In Eskimo, we call it mountain speaking. That whole national park will explode. Can you imagine? Did you know that it will happen? Did you know that in your country, you should go and visit the United States of America. It's an amazingly, stunningly beautiful country. That country holds more atomic bombs than anywhere else on Earth. When Earth shakes, they will crack. And when they crack, they will explode. It's not the war which will cause calamity. It's us. So when you stand by and you do nothing, you become as guilty as everyone else. I've been traveling the world talking about climate change longer than I want to remember. I felt it is important. I'm running for the elders. They send me. And I keep doing it. Tomorrow I go to Germany. And then from there I go to Rome. Oh, I will be chanting at the St. Peter's Church. Can you imagine the Catholic Church is inviting a shaman? Isn't it amazing? And I do that because I feel it is important. And I don't get paid for doing that. It's my responsibility. I'm a shaman. I had that title. I took on that responsibility. So it is my duty to tell the world. It's not the war which will create calamity. It's you. Is that true? Of course it is true. It's you because you stand by and do nothing. You don't fix up the faucet. You keep fracking. You keep using chemicals. Your animals, the cow and the pig, they never had sex for the last 100 years on their own. Medical doctor will put his hand inside it. Okay, and then a baby will be born. Those animals have no cycles. Can you imagine that's what you eat? You eat animals who have no cycles. But nobody says anything. Nobody says anything. That's 100 years that your cows and pigs and your chickens, they live in a few cubicles. But we eat them. And nobody says anything. Where is our mind? But most importantly, where is your spirit? Where is your spirit? So that's why I came here to New York. I talk too much. I just want to thank you for allowing me to come here. I need to change energy. Yeah. And tonight at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, the cycle of the full moon will begin. You know that, right? Do you mind if I chanted the Song of the Moon?
Can we chant it?
Yeah. You should. The old Eskimo, they say that man like you and I have had conversations with the moon. Not you women, but just the men. You and I. Man had never really understood what the heck the moon does. And the woman would say, but he comes and goes, just like the man. He comes and goes. And the man can't comprehend that. So, and the moon had been wanting to tell the man what he does. Finally, one day, the moon got that courage and said to the man, you know what I do for you? Yeah. I bring you light. And without losing a breath, the man says, but you don't bring the warmth. But the moon says, but I bring the light of the sun to you. But you don't bring the warmth of the sun. So what are you talking about? So the moon loses courage and then go back and says, then one day he got the courage again and said, you know what? Because of me, the ocean and the water lives. And the man asked, how? And the moon says, I create high tide and low tide so you can have food from the water. A man had not thought about it like that before. He was pretty impressed with the moon. And then that gave the moon courage. And then he says, you know what? Because of me, your woman will have a moon time. And after that, next generation can be born. I don't know how you do it in New York, but in the Eskimo world, the next generation can be born after sex. S-E-X. You heard about it? Have you heard about it? So that, after the moon time, the next generation can be born. So man never really thought about it like that. He was pretty impressed. Oh, that's pretty good. That gave the moon even more courage. So he says to the man, and you know what? At the very darkest time of your life, I will shine upon you, so you will always have hope. Tonight, about 2 o'clock in the morning, the cycle of the full moon will begin. That's for you and I to understand. At the very darkest time of our life, the moon will shine upon us from the light of the sun, so we can always have hope. So, it means that you are the hope. It's not at your Senate or Congress or in the White House. It's not at United Nations. It's in you. You are the hope. Can you imagine that you are the hope for the world? Then use it. Don't know it. It's no good to know it. It's acting upon it to be the hope. Do you mind if I sang that? Yeah. This is the way I do it. Because I had to go home. I had to travel early in the morning to go to Europe.
We feel sorry for you.
What's that?
I feel sorry for you. There's a lot to do.
Oh! 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 Our prayer is that you take on that responsibility to be the hope for mankind and Mother Earth, for the animals and the plants and the minerals who are with us.
Thank you so much, Uncle. Thank you.
Okay. After this, it's really hard to talk about what I want to say. But as you probably know, Governor Cuomo has put a moratorium on fracking, which is a big disguise, when in truth, he will do everything to put fracking in New York State, which means all of you living in Manhattan. I'm an old Manhattan resident myself. My last address was 111 Bowery. And so it's important that you communicate with him in one form or another, by letters, or maybe the technology, emails or what have you, or telephone. We are all harassing him lovingly. And as you probably know, he has the ambition of going to the White House as well, quite seriously. And that would be also another drama. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening and for participating in this evening's amazing. I mean, I'm so moved by this ceremony. Thank you so much, Uncle. Thank you for coming this great distance and for sharing with us something very profound that I hope will resonate with everyone for a long time. Keep that in your heart. Don't forget that we have a heart. We have hearts. And there's so much love that we're capable of. Take that with you in your daily life. And thank you so much. There's so many people that, Tom Frost, thank you so much for helping so much with just everything that you've done for the production, and Julianne Edgar and Nicole Ansari, Richie Williamson. There's so many people. Steve Durham, who's been putting so much effort and time into shooting this and doing the sound and making sure everything's working. Thank you so much, really. I'm from the bottom of my heart. Everyone that's contributed any amount of energy into this project, into being here tonight. Yes, of course, we have this movie that we're trying to make, we're going to make with the support of mainly the public. And we did a Kickstarter last year, and thank you to the 131 people who helped to support us. But we really feel very strongly that this is an important project. And so we ask that if you have an opportunity to share this project on your social media, also share Uncle's page and the very great work that he's doing for all of us. And he's really sacrificing a lot. And, he needs our support too. So thank you again. So what we're going to do for the last hour is, if you want to talk, together with him and each other, share information, that would be great. And so go with your hearts full. Thank you so much.